Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and in today's video I was doing a split screen analysis with Rory Mcilroy, Finau and Cameron Champ, and for me these are possibly some of the best drivers of the golf ball in the world, and although they all swing it quite differently, I was discussing some of the similarities that they have amongst their backswings and certainly into the downswing and how their body shape is sitting and how that can really aid them in hitting the ball the best they can off the tee. So let's get into it. So in today's video I wanted to do a little review around what creates some of the best drives of the golf ball in the world. So I've got Rory Mcilroy here on the left, Finau on the right, and I'm going to be doing a little bit around Cameron Champ as well. And to be honest with you, I mainly wanted to highlight the upper torso in this session, but I will mention a couple of other little bits around how the hips work as we go along. But if I just draw a line down Rory's ear here and just isolate his lead shoulder and do exactly the same for Tony. Let me just make sure that's correct. But do exactly the same for Tony. We're going to see a couple of similarities. And I think that as much as people swing it very different, they also hold a lot of similarities that make them drive the ball or hit the ball, strike the ball very well. So when Rory goes to the top, you can see that there is this movement off the golf ball. He is moving his pressure into his right side. You can see he's moving his whole mass to the right. Now, that being said, please don't think that you have to sway off the ball loads to do this. It's only to initiate the takeaway for sure, because if I just highlight Rory's hip here, what you are going to see is, yes, he moves off it, but he does start to recenter by the time the club starts to change direction. So he is moving back to the left early enough to make good contact. But when you look at Rory there at the top, what you can see is his head is behind where it originally started. His left shoulder has now moved across him, okay, and he winds up. When we look at Tony, you're going to see very similar characteristics. You're going to see that he does move slightly off to the right. Now, I know the camera is moving around a little bit here, but as he gets to the top you can see he's behind it, and you can see similarities in the shoulder as well, moving across. I would also say that his pelvis hasn't moved off target too much or off centre too much. Now, what really fascinated me when I started to dive into this stuff is how in transition, certainly these guys are further away from that red line up the head than they originally started. So you can even see Tony backing out of it a little bit into the downswing. Now, it's very important that Tony does do this, and I'm going to touch on that shortly. But I think what really fascinated me is how they are behind where they started. Their shoulders are elevated from where they were at address. And more importantly, their lead shoulder is moving up and behind them. That's helping them unload the club head, it's helping them hit up on the ball, and it's helping them open up through impact. And that is common through long drivers. You'll see that left shoulder get higher and higher amongst all the long drivers as well to help them hit up on the golf ball. Now, let me just show you Cameron Champ as well. And you are going to see again, many similarities throughout, even though they swing it so very different. If we take a look at Cameron, if I draw a line up his head here and one down the shoulder, use blue here just because he's wearing a red shirt, you will see as he starts to move to the top, again, the pelvis doesn't start shifting too far off. He is moving his right hip behind him for sure, and you can see his head is moving just behind where it originally started. And the lead shoulder has actually travelled quite a long way in this swing. Now into the downswing again, the head is backing up again. Another reason that this is really important for this player, and I'm going to talk about it with Tony now as well, is that they create quite a strong wrist angle and aggressive shaft lean coming into the ball. Now, that golf club hasn't got a lot of loft on it, and for most amateurs, we wouldn't have the power to get the ball airborne like this. We wouldn't create enough spin or launch. But even for these guys, they start to back out last minute to be able to square the club, and you'll see here for both of these players where they have such strong wrist angles holding that right wrist back, even though we wouldn't necessarily teach this to most guys, but they are able to return the shaft into a pretty original state, then still not creating loads of shaft lean. So by them actually backing out of it, they're able to hold on to, they're able to create the correct amount of shaft lean and loft to help them get maximum spin and launch. So I hope you found that extremely helpful, and more so isolating how the upper body really works for these guys. We can really see that the pelvis stays relatively central, but their head still loads behind it. The pelvis still shifts forward for the most part, and the head hangs back. The only player that's slightly different on that is Cameron Champ, who doesn't, he still moves forward as you can see, but he spins his hips a lot harder. So I hope you found it helpful, and I'll see you soon. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and hopefully you can understand a little bit more about the matchups that these guys have that make them the best drivers of the golf ball in the world. How even though they have quite a lot of shaft lean coming into the ball, that they actually tip their bodies a little bit more backwards in an effort to line up the shaft. Equally, some of the other best players in the world will do equally a good job of hanging back but unloading the club head, and as they unload that club head, it's able to ground out a little earlier and then hit up on the ball really nicely. So I hope that video made sense to many of you. If you have any questions, just pop them in the comments box below, and if you like what you saw, then please subscribe to the channel. It'll be extremely helpful.